Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, guy.
Yeah, the YouTube stream works like pretty much every couple of hours.
You can do emoji reactions.
Do they have any pawns?
They don't have pause.
They have special emojis, but they're all boring.
Because you have pause anymore.
Oh, that's right. They got rid of it.
Wait, well, it's because the guy.
Wait, the guy who did POG participated in January 6th.
Or he supported it. I don't know. He might. Wait, someone else is doing it.
Wrestling.
Who else is quick chatting? Right, sir. I saw other people. Well, this is the same one.
I don't think you will be able to see.
Oh, yeah, no, someone else.
You're missing. Communicate with them in
Morse code.
But it's what's going on. It's
I can't tell if this is me or not.
I just have to. It might feel like this is.
Oh, hi, Miss K.
Guys, take your name.
Miss King's gonna take your seat, and Miss Birch is gonna, Jim, you can scoot over.
That's okay. Sorry, it's okay.
Hey, you can sit with us.
Right.
Yeah, sit with the stars.
The wrestlers.
Oh, wow.
He's a star wrestler.
Really?
Yeah. Big deal.
I think you're running, you're number one right now, aren't you? As far as attendance, that's awesome. You've been to what? Almost all of them, except two.
Except one.
One.
Maya, I love your time.
Oh, thank you.
I want to sing the song.
Do it.
Every click you make. Is that not what it's a reference to?
Yeah, that's precisely what that is.
Thank you.
1983, released his album Synchronicity, saw the tour.
Typically
Pennsylvania, the date was July.
Poppage, I have a hot take. I have a hot take, Mr. Poppage. Ghost in the Machine is better than Synchronicity.
And
I heard a statistic, there is something like $10,000. Still.
Police were very disappointed by it. Actually, did not have good stage presence. Miss Birch is on her way. Oh, and we've got the lesser half of the Prim dynasty coming in right now.
Who is this?
Oh, Miss Prim.
Like this.
All right, welcome everyone to day 5, or 9th and 10th Thesis Defenses here today. We have Maya and Lauren today, and again, Friday, awesome time to come out with some intellectual stimulation. This has been a really enjoyable project to work on, and ultimately, I would say the topic maybe I learned the most about, I think, was Maya's and probably Alex's, and really interesting. Would have loved to have teamed them up on the same day, but maybe better to keep the text up, separated. Anyways, Maya, of course, legendary writer, NHD, national finalist in research paper writing, 9th grade, right?
It was 9th grade, yeah.
9th grade, wow. I think you're going to really enjoy this presentation. And again, she even reached out to some alum and doing the research, which she'll tell you a little bit about. Let's give it up for Maya.
I'm ready when you're ready. Okay. So, hello, welcome to my presentation, Every Click You Make, Surveillance Capitalism and the Question of Data. Today, I'll be talking about surveillance capitalism and the impact that it has on society. So before diving into the topic and before diving into my literature review, it's important to understand what surveillance capitalism is. Shoshona Zuboff coined the term in her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism in 2019, and she used it to refer to how tech companies collect data from consumers to sell them products and to an extent manipulate their behavior. Notably, surveillance capitalism blurs the line between corporate and government surveillance, as data collected by companies can be used by the government to exercise soft power. So of course, I mentioned the age of surveillance capitalism. It is one of the most important things that guided my research. It especially helped guide my first chapter of my thesis, in which I talked about how surveillance capitalism worked in the technical sense, as well as its history. And I also had the pleasure, I published a video on the NBC about data and privacy, and I got to talk to him about surveillance capitalism, the impact it had on society, and how the issue is not as black and white as it seems. I also used a lot of journals and reports for my literature review. I used Pew Research Center to discover what Americans thought about the data being collected by the government, what they thought about privacy law, and what they thought about corporations collecting their information. I also used frontiers in psychology to explore the relationship between social media and psychology, and I used the New York Times for a lot of the primary narratives included in this thesis. So one must understand how surveillance capitalism works in the technical sense, in addition to its definition, in order to dive into the issue. One can liken the role played by digital surveillance in the 21st century to the panopticon, an idea proposed by British philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Essentially, the panopticon consisted of several prisons in which the general populace would reside, and a watchtower in which an inspector would reside as well. And the inspector's role was to look into the lives of the citizens, similar to the role played by corporations and the government, as they investigate how citizens use their phones and other sorts of technology. Both first and third parties are there to collect data. First parties are the sites a visitor logs onto, while third parties collect information using cookies and other tracking tools. Together, first and third parties can collect an obscene amount of information. And here I'm showing the information, the cookies that were used on Farhad Manjoo's quick internet browse that lasted about an hour. As you can see, there have been a lot of trackers on the sites that he had visited, and the sites that he visited were not even that shady, like Huffington Post and the Washington Post. All this information can go to data brokers, who are companies or people who collect people's data and resell that data to others. There are data brokering companies that specialize in data brokering specifically, but then also first parties can be data brokers as well. These first parties can interact with data brokers, either other first parties or these specialized companies, to gain further insight into people's lives. Behavior control was mentioned a little bit earlier in this thesis. In the age of surveillance capitalism, Zuboff mentioned 4 forms of behavioral control used by surveillance capitalism, them being nudging, herding, conditioning, and contagion. Nudging is changing the environments in which people make decisions. For example, placing candy next to a register urges people to buy the candy. Meanwhile, herding is forcing a person into one situation. And the example that Zuboff uses is how Pokemon Go forces people to step into enterprises in order to catch Pokemon, which in turn becomes lucrative for the businesses. On the other hand, conditioning is controlling people's behavior through reward and punishment, and contagion is compelling internet users to hop on bandwagons. Both conditioning and contagion can be seen in social media's likes and dislikes system, in which people are punished with dislikes, rewarded with likes, and further rewarded with an algorithm that prioritizes posts that require more likes. So the Founding Fathers saw privacy as a fundamental right bestowed upon mankind by God. The Fourth Amendment was written into the Constitution, and essentially the Fourth Amendment made it unlawful for people to intrude onto other people's property without a warrant. This was only limited to the physical space, however, as they had no conception of the internet, or of telephone lines, or of any other non-physical space. In 1967, however, this changed. A gambler named Charles Katz was convicted by law enforcement after a recording device was placed outside of a public phone booth. He protested that his Fourth Amendment rights were violated, and therefore the Fourth Amendment was extended beyond just physical space in Katz versus the United States. After 9/11 occurred, the government sought techniques to collect people's personal data and to protect the nation from being under threat, and the Patriot Act helped authorize this. In addition, total information awareness, established in 2002, allowed surveillance and capitalism to become intertwined. The government would mine online information, such as credit card purchases and ATM activity, to investigate and combat potential terrorists. Surveillance capitalism affects almost every aspect of digital life today. Because surveillance capitalists aren't intended to be the world's moral arbiters, surveillance capitalism's consequences aren't always positive. So in 2016, surveillance capitalism began to gain public notoriety during the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Cambridge Analytica had gained information of 5,000 data points and data on up to 87 million Facebook profiles to help Facebook micro-target users whose behavior could be easily influenced. Apparently, this was intended to help Donald Trump get voted into office. At one point, Facebook also allowed companies to hide advertisements from certain demographic groups, leading it to be sued by the Department of Housing and Urban Development in 2019. Though Facebook announced that it would stop showing housing ads selectively, the issue of biased ad targeting still remains unresolved. And here is the dashboard used by the companies to target the advertisers, to target the advertisements. The companies can exclude genders, for example, and they can also exclude people based on their race. Customized ad targeting shouldn't be one's only concern with surveillance capitalism and discrimination. For surveillance technology that would act automatically and not manually would be programmed with the biases of the society in which it was developed due to the skewed data being sampled. The Chicago heat list, for example, was developed using predictive policing models using information from primarily Black neighborhoods in Chicago. Because its sampling was skewed, it determined that 6% of Black males between the ages of 20 and 29 were likely to be perpetrators or witnesses of violence. Social media algorithms manufactured for the sake of surveillance capitalism also help contribute to the dissemination of misinformation. Content visibility is usually determined by user engagement, which is measured with interactions with posts such as comments, likes, views, and shares. Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook founder explained that harmful material, including self-harm content and hate speech, is more likely to gain engagement than normal content. Therefore, extreme content becomes the center of attention. However, Americans might find it difficult to learn about their own privacy rights, much less the rights that they have or the lack of rights that they have whenever they sign up to contracts with companies due to how difficult privacy policies may be to read. This was a study conducted by the New York Times. They gauged how long it would take to read a privacy policy in addition to the reading level of the privacy policy. And Facebook's privacy policy was apparently more difficult to read than A Brief History of Time, and GoDaddy's privacy policy was apparently more difficult to read than A Critique of Pure Reason. However, not all privacy policies are like this, as the BBC's privacy policy was about middle school level. It is difficult to never leave a data trail. In 2014, which would have been almost a decade ago, BBC technology correspondent Roy Felon-Jones attempted a data diet for a day, and he had to walk on foot because even his license plate could be tracked. At this point, technology has come so far that trying to expel surveillance capitalism from one's life is unfeasible. Surveillance capitalism already dominates digital life, so its effect on society is likely to grow even more profound. To illustrate how it may create an even larger impact than it already has, it is in fact useful to compare real-world surveillance capitalism practices to science fiction. The watchful eyes of surveillance capitalism draw frequent comparisons with Big Brother figure from George Orwell's 1984, which was essentially omnipresent in this new world order in which the law of a joyless totalitarian state was enforced through surveillance technology. While real-life regimes are not nearly as harsh as those found in 1984, some Big Brother-ish tendencies cause worry for those concerned with theirs and others' privacy. Within China, for example, a social credit system that tracks users' behavior with technology has been implemented by the Chinese Communist Party. People with higher credit scores gained from actions such as donating to charity and befriending others could gain benefits such as hotel fee waivers. This way, the Chinese government uses access to people's data to get people to behave in the way that it wishes. Unfortunately, high-tech surveillance can also be dangerous for minorities who live within regimes, for example, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, China, as well as other members of Turkic Muslim ethnic groups. They find their personal data collected by the government, who would flag behavior deemed suspicious, but could be something as innocuous as not using the front door very often. Watching minorities through their personal information allows authorities to arrest and detain them with little justification. This isn't to say digital governance is all bad. A tour of the Unique Identity Project in India has been mandatory since 2012, and it gives otherwise undocumented citizens access to government services. It keeps citizens accountable and prevents people from committing identity theft so that services would properly be channeled to poor beneficiaries. While an aggressive surveillance state would paralyze its people with fear and loyalty, a government that provides its citizens entertainment all the time could also be a threat to democracy. In Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, a popular science fiction novel, a dystopian society was depicted in which citizens were kept alive with pleasures such as recreational drugs and cinematic sensory productions akin to virtual reality to the touch. As a global network allowing any user to share text, photos, video clips, and other media, the internet's a home to many diversions. Austrian researchers have published a study. They are to publish a study in May 2023 that studies the relationship between entertainment-oriented social media and political participation. As subjects were exposed to more entertainment-oriented content, as can be shown right here, their political interest decreased as they were exposed to more political content in midst of the entertaining content. When the entertainment factor was low, as in they were bombarded with less entertaining content, the more political content they were exposed to, the more their political engagement increased. However, the opposite was true as the entertainment factor was raised. Despite these visions of a dystopian society, technology used for surveillance capitalism can be used for good. For example, artificial intelligence systems may be able to pinpoint diseases early on rather than through an observation of symptoms, like when doctors in maternity wards have used mass data collection to diagnose babies right after they're born. They used 1,000 data points to track 16 of the baby's vital signs, and they're able to predict oncoming medical problems before the infants showed symptoms. Children's education may also be more successful by thinking like a surveillance capitalist. In Hong Kong, the program For Little Trees, developed by Find Solution AI, gauges students' progress and reads emotions while tailoring assignments. In turn, this reduces teachers' workloads and improves students' exam performance. So there's much that one can do to curtail the negative effects of surveillance capitalism, either through content moderation and through amending privacy law. So first off, Congress has limited power to make any laws regarding what content gets seen or does not get seen on the internet due to the First Amendment right of freedom of speech. Therefore, it becomes the responsibility of corporations themselves to choose what gets seen on platforms. The government still has a level of authority to obstruct intentionally instigating information. However, most of the content moderation is arbitrated by the companies themselves. Because there's so much content online, companies mostly employ algorithms to remove any inappropriate content as swiftly as possible. However, there is often times when human intervention is needed. It is important to have a diversity in developers and in the sampling that is used to feed the content moderation algorithms. There was a situation in which content moderation algorithms were more likely to flag African-American English as inappropriate language, even if it was appropriate content, simply because the data sample used was mostly from white users. Having more diverse teams and a more diverse sample will help companies assess what data should be used in the samples algorithms are trained on. Much of the darker side of content moderation lies within its human side, however. In the developing world, in places like India and the Philippines, content moderation is often a full-time job. These moderators are exposed to some of the most extreme content online, and it is likely to cause them depression, anxiety, obsessive ruminations, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Employers and Silicon Valley firms outsourcing the work can draw inspiration from harm prevention techniques recommended for other forms of work, such as taking psychological risk into consideration, health and safety training, and protocols in case employees need a break from work. Strong social support networks could also be used to preserve the well-being of people suffering from emotionally taxing jobs. Reddit and Twitch moderators already bond with one another, carrying these burdens of the work that they do, and their full-time counterparts in the developing world can do the same. Another action that can be taken to curtail the negative effects of surveillance capitalism is reforming American privacy law. Now, American privacy law is incredibly difficult to define, as comprehensive laws vary by state, and only recently did the United States governments introduce a comprehensive system of laws in the form of the American Data Privacy and Protection Act. Though it's a significant step towards fair data governments, there's still action needed. Europe, however, has more comprehensive privacy laws than the United States, and the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, forms the basis of much of this privacy law. Neither GDPR nor American privacy law requires user permission for obtaining and selling data, but GDPR explicates that consent is one legal ground for processing data. And unlike in the United States, consent is only sound when it is presented in a way that is intelligible, which means no jargon and no technically illegal language in the contract. The US can advocate for European standards of transparency by setting a maximum length and reading level for its privacy policies. Fortunately, GDPR-inspired laws have been implemented in places such as California and Virginia this year as the country continues to progress with its assessment of data. Other forms of data governance can also help protect people's privacy rights in the face of surveillance capitalism. Data cooperatives put control of information into researchers' own hands. People participating in data cooperatives pull together their data so they may compare their economic, financial, and health conditions. Alternatively, data trusts allow trusters, who could be individuals or organizations, to safeguard data for trustees or people with, according to the Open Data Institute, a legally binding duty to make decisions about the data in the best interests of beneficiaries. Though extracting information from constantly surveilled users is seemingly dystopian, an alarmist response to surveillance capitalism is counterproductive due to how entrenched it is in our lives. Therefore, instead of fearing a data-driven future, humanity must learn to live alongside surveillance capitalism, using mass data collection to its advantage, while ensuring that online content is filtered and privacy rights are respected. This can be done through continued ambition and learning how to deal with our own data. Thank you.
Only at 17 minutes, see?
Nice.
We may have overcut, so I'm going to give you an opportunity. I know this ended up on the cutting room floor, so I'm going to throw this out at first. How did you integrate a really, really important piece, Amused to Death? You want to elaborate on that?
So Amused to
aspect?
Death, I talked about the relationship between like surveillance capitalism, entertainment on social media, and diversion from political engagement. Amused to Death by Neil Postman was my most important source in assessing that, and unfortunately I did not have time to get to that. Its argument was about television and how things like television and disseminating information everywhere and it being superficial information basically lowered the quality of like content and the content people consumed overall. But I think the same argument could apply to the internet, especially since the internet is like such a wider space and information is dispersible so much more quickly. Actually, maybe Amused to Death could apply even more so to the internet than it does with TV.
Absolutely. Corporations in alliance with the government, how is the relationship? Is it more symbiotic or is it more combative, confrontational at this point, and how you see it maybe evolving in the future?
Sure. So like the relation, for most of what I studied, it was kind of symbiotic. Like the government does collaborate a lot with these companies that provide personal data. There was actually one case that I didn't even have the opportunity to include it in my paper, but like Muslim prayer apps, they share the data of the people using the prayer apps with the US government, which is kind of creepy, but it's a way for the government to dispel terrorist threats. Yeah, it's kind of cringy, but this is what happens.
Did you struggle at all with seeing a lot of bias in the research where there may have been a lot of pieces written that had a particular agenda, and how were you able to navigate through that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Actually, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, it was written in a very, very alarmist way. I agree with a lot of the arguments made, but in a way it kind of demonized social media and made it seem more powerful than it actually was. It does pose a bit of a danger having all that information available to these companies like at any time, but it's not like they are brainwashing you with, I don't know, like behavioral control or targeting ads and stuff like that. Whenever I was reading The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, a lot of the way she wrote about behavioral control, it was like as if they were puppeting you, when really it's not puppeting you. It's just the way that like companies play with your mind. It's a normal thing. It is annoying and it is a little creepy, but it's not as atypical as she made it sound. And to go on like how I navigated the research, it's actually very difficult to find stuff on surveillance capitalism that paints it in a positive light, because obviously everybody's scared of it. It's like a new technological thing. It seems like literally 1984. But there's some stuff that I was able to read where it talked about it wasn't as bad as it sounded, which I did try to address that in my paper about how mass data collection could be used for the greater good.
James?
Maya, you did a really good job.
Thank you.
I always like am blown away how like I'll be having a conversation with someone and then I'll sign onto my phone and then all of a sudden like
Yeah.
Facebook ad will pop up and it'll be like, when I was buying a house, oh, do you need someone to, you know, paint your house? Oh, that's weird. But I was very fascinated by the game of life in China.
Yeah.
The little kind of like social conditioning thing. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so essentially, China's credit system, everyone starts at a score of 1,000. And it can go up or down from 1,000, basically depending on how compliant you act with the law. So if you praise the government on social media, I know, it can be kind of cringy, but I honestly think it's genius. If you praise the government on social media, if you befriend someone, if you give to the poor, anything like that, credit score will go up, and the higher credit score you get, the more likely you are able to gain benefits like, I don't know, when you apply to college, you get priority, you get discounts, stuff like that. And if you do things that the government doesn't like cheating in an online game, your credit score goes down from 1,000. And you might, like, things might be pricier for you. Maybe you'll be restricted access on some services and things like that. I talked a little bit about conditioning in this presentation. It's a very good form of conditioning. It's a very good form of reward and punishment to get people to behave in a way that is desired.
And do people like participate knowingly? And is it like they
they know their credit score. Like, and also we talked a little bit about this in comparative. People with lower credit scores, they will be like put on like a blacklist on in magazines, publicly shamed. So it's a very effective form of conditioning.
Is this just a quick question? Is that what the Black Mirror episode is?
That's exactly what I
Oh, I haven't seen Black Mirror.
I was curious if you used it. Yeah. That's exactly what I was doing.
I showed up in sci-fi.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ms. King, anything else? This audience, I know, has a bunch of questions. We got some pseudo experts here.
All right, hi Alex.
Yeah, I want to know, when you were doing your research, did you find any like private individuals of companies using data that collected data maliciously? So
I wasn't able to find any individuals. I mostly focused on corporations. There's some instances in which sometimes it could be used like by the government in a way that I guess it's not exactly malicious, but is very unfair. Like, I did talk to you a little bit about the guy from Palestine who went to Harvard, and then they saw his friend's social media profile, and he became guilty by association because that friend was basically posting things that were anti-American, and he got deported. So that was most of the stuff that the research was on, not really on individuals that were conducting anything out of malice.
So a lot of apps have been like introducing AI chat boxes, and I don't know if you know about like Snapchat and like it's like in my AI, but basically it acts like a person, and like you can have like conversations with it. But you know, children are being exposed to like these AI chat boxes. How do you think that like parents, I guess, but like just like individuals themselves can like regulate themselves from being affected, like behavioral wise from this stuff? Because I know that you said that there's a positive side to this stuff, but like behavioral like wise, it's not very like productive.
So the thing is, with like when you said children interacting with AI, I don't think it's even legal for that information to be, if they're like under 13, for that information to be like, if you type it into the AI and it's like shared with the company or the government, I don't think that's even legal. If the person is older, then I think in that case you would just follow the privacy policy of the company, which as I said, it's not always explicit. So maybe in fact, just take the time to read it, even if it might be difficult. But also I know with ChatGPT, they say, don't type anything personal into this chatbot. So that's another, just follow that guideline, and that can help you prevent yourself from like giving away your personal information. And also, this is only tangentially related to what you said, but another way of making sure you're on track is clearing your cookies in your browser. And as I was doing this project, I did that. I haven't done it since, and I probably should, but that's another method that could be used. Stevie.
What are basically cookies?
Okay, so they're little pieces of software that are attached to like your browser or your computer, and they are able to collect information about you. It's like whenever you say do not ask app not to track or like reject all cookies. You reject these little pieces of software from tracking your information across the internet. And sometimes cookies are used in a way that is helpful, like Google, you staying signed on to Google, it can't function without cookies. Cookies kind of what allows the computer to remember you and remember that you're signed in. However, other cookies can collect your information. If you've noticed on privacy policies, there's a section that says there's necessary cookies and then there's everything else. Those necessary cookies, there has to be those trackers to allow the website to work. When everything else, you can just kind of get rid of it.
About those prompts you get on websites, sometimes depending on the website I'm using, it's either very clear that I can reject all the cookies or not, and other times it's a very long process that seems intentionally designed to preserve cookies in your browser. Is that because of different the places in which the company is located, like Europe, the US, that kind of thing?
To an extent, I think yes, but also I've seen like there's easy like cookie disablers on American sites, so I can't exactly say whether or not it's completely dependent on location. Maybe these companies have become more data conscious, maybe with the direction in which American states have been shifting and the US in general, like towards like more rights-based privacy laws. Maybe that's why we're seeing those easy cop-outs more and more often, but I cannot say whether or not it's based on location.
Did you come across any research that kind of put on like a spectrum or something of how we do as far as other countries with privacy laws? Like, are we in the middle? Are we great? Are we trash? You know, like, where do we fall on this spectrum?
I only know us in comparison to Europe, because that's what I did research on. I researched American privacy law versus GDPR. Now, of course, that's a place where I could extend my research on other privacy laws, on other countries and how they use privacy laws. And it'd be especially interesting to investigate countries which do want to surveil their citizens, like China, which I mean, the US government does too, but China to an even greater extent.
All right, sort of complicated question here,
Okay.
but Neil, so Neil Postman, his teacher, we've talked about before, was Marshall McLuhan, who made the famous statement, "The medium is the message."
Yes.
And Postman goes on, and using ourselves to death to kind of describe part of that, like when you're watching TV news, you know, the fact that it's on television is essentially giving you a message about the meaningfulness of that news. Extending that to, you know, social media and spheres like that, do you think that there's some sort of implicit message in people engaging in this, knowing that they're being surveilled or that their things may be used, their information may be used by these companies?
I don't think there's like any message conveyed by the fact that they're being surveyed. Maybe it's something that might cause alarm to some people. Maybe it's something that may even be dangerous to some people, like the Palestinian guy I mentioned, or if you're a woman trying to get an abortion in a state where they have outlawed that, that's where it poses a danger to you. But I think like as far as the medium being the message on social media, because it's like you can share information so quickly and it's general like quick bites of information, quick bites of like entertainment and stuff like that. That's kind of what causes the quality of the information to drop. Not that it's on social media itself, but because such a platform allows for such rapid fire.
Speed.
Yeah, it's the speed, it's the amount of consumption, it's like your attention span like kind of just goes down because you're so used to like just quick bites of information. Now, again, that's to reemphasize the quality of the information itself probably isn't affected by the fact that it's on social media, but it's just the fact that such a platform allows that rapid fire dissemination of information. You had your hand up for a while.
This is very,
Yeah.
this is very simple, but like, where is like all this data like being stored? Like, I don't know. That's just it. That's all.
So I do know that these companies possess this data. they can share it. I don't know about servers that it's being stored on, or if they have like a very specific database. They probably have databases, but as far as like, I don't know, like I can't name drop like where Facebook keeps everything. I just know that they possess it.
Axiom and such.
Last question. Okay, last question. Yeah, yeah, okay. Having done all of this research, how has that informed your like search history or social media usage, all of this kind of, how is your relationship with technology, how has that changed?
It's changed a little bit. There are some things that I cannot escape, like whenever I make my enrollment deposit to my college, oh, my college has my credit card information. Yes, I'm screwed, like I can't really do anything about that. Same thing, like my dad and I were filling out one of the financial aid profiles and I had to share my social security number. There's nothing else, they couldn't really do anything else. They're going to have that information. So things that are inevitable, I kind of just have to deal with it. With other things, clearing cookies, I guess, is another way that it's affected the way that I've interacted with technology. I can't say it hasn't impacted me that greatly because like, it's just so difficult to navigate around it, like, I guess like data dieting and like data safety and like there's so many things that you want to do in which like people would need your data. And then there was another thing. There are like little bits of like data consciousness that I had while doing this project. Like I was going to send one of my close friends some baby pictures of myself on through our Discord. And I was like, well, maybe my parents don't want Discord with that information. So I instead sent it to her like through SMS, just regular text messaging, because Apple already has those images. And I didn't want an extra company to like have those in their possession.
Maybe the last question. I know you did some interviews and they were really beneficial. Tell us a little bit about maybe missed opportunities. If you could restart this project, what interviews would you want to conduct to make this project, stronger?
Data brokers. I originally wanted to interview data brokers, but I ran out of time and I couldn't get a contact in time. That would have been really beneficial. If I could, I was going to interview the author of The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, but my email didn't go through the mail, which was really disappointing. I'd probably also interview people who probably saw surveillance capitalism as a good thing, like maybe someone like working in the field of like data who were like, well, this isn't that bad. And I could interview some more cybersecurity experts because I interviewed a lawyer and a video producer who had knowledge on the topic, but it wouldn't have been as extensive as someone who has spent their life dedicating the field, studying the field. Yeah.
Great job.
You did amazing, Maya.
Thank you.
Great job, Maya.
James?
They're gonna want to go with you up there with Maya.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Yes.
We'll go back to your first slide. We'll get a photo together. Then we'll get
I thought you were.
And anyone that wants to, it should be up. If anyone wants to watch it, they didn't get to come. It'll be up on the YouTube. Yeah, and yeah, we can tell. We share the link with you.
Hey, Tom, should we scoot the podium over a little bit?
Oh yeah, that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
We might be able to. Here, we'll get to. James will get on each side right here. I think we can. I think we should all get together. We have enough room.
This is good, just like this.
Oh, okay.
I just family members, I think. One, two,
I'll make sure that I'm trying to find that funny video information.
All right. Yeah, that's, we don't want Dad here.
We're good.
One, two, three.
Oh, yeah.
All right, can I get one of this camera?
Yes.
One, two, three. Thank you. I like it. I have a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, because I left early because I'm sick.
Oh,
It's been,
That's fine. How's it feel?
thank you, it feels good to finally be over.
I know. I'm ready. Are you going to the slides?
Yes.
I'm gonna text them. Say, hey, we're ready. Let's just stand out. Yeah.
Great job. You missed a great time. It was pretty good. Like a crazy movie.
So what, crazy. Crazy, growing up. Growing up. Oh, yeah, really?
You need, Lauren, you need water?
Yes, sir.
You're a working.
Yeah.
This reminds me of the woods. I love it.
No, I appreciate it. I did kind of
Yeah, it's
rush.
so we see what you do.
I really, I really enjoyed parts of it. So it was kind of happy. 20 years since then.
She told me the color, I'm like, I can get that. We've got about a minute or so. I always love Friday afternoon. Nothing like intellectual stimulation on a Friday afternoon.
Nothing like it. Nothing like it.
Tempo, okay? So we're trying to do it. We can wait. You waiting or something?
Yes. Should be like 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes. Right?
If it can, yes.
Okay.
It's on platform.
Yeah.
Someone need to let me in.
My husband's at the doorway.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you.
Probably just my boyfriend, give him a hard time.
Not this hard time. Wait. Okay. About 4.
He was golfing. Isn't that so?
Hey, Mom, it's extremely well. I was like, never mind, come back.
Where'd you go?
Wait, he's almost.
He was a Catholic.
I didn't get
I know. He was one of those. I know.
I need to grill him a little bit, make sure he's worthy.
Yeah, give him a really He's gotta get nervous.
Can you act really upset at him?
Please.
Like,
Yeah,
holding him
please.
up?
Talk to him.
Act like young man, this is unacceptable.
He's gonna like turn around and walk out.
What a crew. This is a, here. Look at this, King. Look at this turnout. Awesome crew. Yeah. Hopefully at least had a good round of golf.
Yeah.
You should say it around.
Did you click to make sure?
Is there a certain way to point it?
Well, just don't make it as off, but I mean, oh, has camera angle okay? Because I know Maya had.
Yeah, the camera's good.
Yeah,
Someone
okay.
Make sure I look okay.
No, it was Maya had, it's like, she was up here. She tapped the screen.
He knows.
But no one had done that yet, so.
Yeah,
He's walking in.
I don't know.
Hey, Cam. Bob Watts, sorry. Podium?
Or the camera. So
Oh.
she's kind of working like,
Yeah.
you see what I'm talking
I
about?
That way, or am I going long?
Yes, you're going right.
Is that okay or more?
A little bit more. There you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
good?
Yeah.
Again, everyone's been waiting. Welcome. This is our 10th of 22 senior honors thesis defenses. The ag topics are popular this year. I'm not sure. Is farming making a comeback or something? I'm not sure. Again, phenomenal project. It has been a joy to work with Lauren this year. Finished the project. I think the earliest this year, definitely, first person to finish. But I think it's in the 21 years I've been doing this, I think it's the second earliest ever. So again, always on task, always organized. It's going to do great things beyond PA. So let's give it up to Lauren Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Topich, and thank you everyone for coming to the defense of my honor senior thesis, Agribusiness, the Unintended Consequences of Rapid Growth in Agriculture. To begin, I'm going to cover the sources that were most vital in the understanding and the writing of my thesis. To begin, Food Fix by Mark Hyman was a source that I used heavily throughout my whole thesis. It really laid the foundation for what I wanted to write about and really inspired a passion about this topic in me. Farm and Other F Words, as well as Perilous Bounty, were two sources I used heavily in my economics section. It taught me about the monetary side of farming. For my environmental chapter, my interview with Professor Jeff Edwards, the Crop, Soil, and Environmental Scientist Chair at the University of Arkansas, as well as Silent Spring and Kiss the Ground, helped me narrow down which environmental impacts I wanted to write about. My nutrition section, I heavily used academic journals, such as Ultra-Processed Foods, Added Sugar, and the Social Cost of Obesity, as well as agricultural subsidies and their influence on the composition of U.S. food supply and consumption. To wrap up my thesis, the articles Sugarcoating Science, How the Food Industry Misleads Consumers on Sugar, and Folks, This Ain't Normal helped me wrap up my policy recommendation section for a more sustainable future. To begin, the term agribusiness is the word used to encompass all economic activity related to farming. It has three major components: agrochemicals, breeding, and machinery and equipment. Pesticides and fertilizers, as well as any growth chemicals, falls under the agrochemicals division. Breeding includes the breeding of livestock for food products, as well as the breeding of a seed for a more resilient crop.
Machinery and equipment includes the machinery and technology used on the farm to increase productivity and efficiency. This term dates back to around the 1930s when mechanized farming was increased without knowledge of soil health and erosion, leading to the Dust Bowl. In order to restore the land back to its previous state, farmers heavily relied on the use of chemicals rather than soil conservation techniques. By then, farming transitioned into an industry where mechanics and chemicals were dominant by the mid-20th century, increasing productivity on the farm as seen in this graph. This new era was classified as the Green Revolution. While the Green Revolution had many successes, it also is responsible for many severe environmental consequences. The copious amounts of pesticides and fertilizers used during the revolution polluted countless waterways and soils, impacting animal and human health. Additionally, many blame the Green Revolution for the vast majority of depleted soils we are seeing today. But perhaps one of the most concerning issues to arise from the revolution was the dominance of corporate agriculture over small family farms at the expense of human health. In order to understand the economic side of farming, we must take a look into the monetary side. It seems counterintuitive that there would exist a society where unhealthy substances such as processed foods trump organic pasture-raised products. However, this is being seen in America today. In Mark Hyman's book, Hannah, the owner of a small family farm, shared the story of a woman who refused to purchase an $8 pound of pasture-raised ground beef, but interestingly enough, spent $200 at the distillery next door. This proves that Americans do have the money to spend, do have the means to spend money on higher quality food, except they are turning towards processed foods and alcohol. In order to understand the economic side of farming, it is imperative to understand the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill was created in 1993 and is a piece of legislation that is drafted every 3 to 5 years, dictating what food is grown and under which methods. It includes a plethora of subjects, the most important being funding government programs, administering subsidies, and determining what Americans eat. Subsidies make up one of the largest sectors of the Farm Bill and account for the trillions of dollars the federal government spends every year. They were established during the Great Depression to ensure the country had a steady supply of food. The issue lies in the fact that the most heavily subsidized crops today are rarely consumed in their natural whole state. The Farm Bill contributes a very limited amount of money to the growing of fruits and vegetables. In fact, apples are the only sort of produce that receives any subsidies, and they only account for 1% of total government subsidies. Despite the fact that Americans are encouraged to fill 50% of their plates with fruits and vegetables, the Farm Bill ironically discourages the growing of them. It specifically states that any farmer who receives subsidies for commodity crops is strictly prohibited from growing fruits and vegetables. Commodity farming has become increasingly popular among farmers and has begun to dominate the farming industry. A commodity is any product that is so uniform and consistent that individual units are indistinguishable despite coming from different sellers. The majority of commercial farms today are involved in commodity farming because it's an easy way to own lots of land independently while earning a decent profit. The farming industry, which once consisted of thousands of companies, has dwindled to a small few that now loom over each of their industries. In the 1950s, 8 companies controlled the technology and machinery sector. Today, there are only 3 from which farmers have the choice to buy from, the largest being John Deere, owning 63% of combines purchased in the U.S. while owning 53% of the tractor market. The fertilizer market is another sector of agriculture that is controlled by only a few large companies that own the $11 billion industry. Additionally, the global grain market is another division of agriculture that is controlled by 4 companies owning 87% of the market. These massive grain traders do not just grow and sell their crop, they transform it into highly profitable products such as corn-based ethanol and animal feed. Modern-day farming in America has transitioned from the traditional family farm to corporate farms. Nowadays, farmers take home less than 15 cents on the dollar compared to 37 cents in the 1980s. With 88% of agricultural production coming from only 12% of farms in the U.S., it is true that only substantial corporate farms can survive. The rapid growth in the agricultural industry has led to an astronomical increase in chemical dependency. While agrochemicals may seem beneficial for growing food to aid a developing population, it has posed serious threats to the future of the environment. The introduction of fertilizers into the agricultural industry dates back to around the 1930s when German scientist Fritz Haber invented the Haber-Bosch process, creating what is now known as fertilizer. The use of chemicals in agriculture has resulted in increased yields, but due to their success, they can now be found in almost everything an individual eats, drinks, and breathes. A study conducted by the American Institute of Biological Sciences found that every year 70,000 different chemicals are released into the atmosphere, with nearly 10% of them being classified as carcinogens. The increased use of chemical inputs in agriculture has resulted in a loss of biodiversity across the country. The U.S. has seen a spike in the extinction of species 1 to 10,000 times higher than the natural rate, suggesting their harmful impacts. Biodiversity is vital for the health of the environment because without it, the food chains will collapse, global warming will worsen, and the food system will become non-existent. However, one of the most pressing issues in the environment today is the loss of fertile soil due to the enhanced use of chemicals. The soil has now begun to become immune to the pesticides and fertilizers, similar to antibiotic resistance. In my interview with Professor Jeff Edwards, he states that soil resistance to chemicals is one of the most threatening and serious environmental issues today. The U.S. has lost 30% of the once arable land in the past 40 years, with topsoil being degraded at 10 million hectares a year. This proves that the soil is eroding 100 times faster than it is being formed, leaving 25% of the Earth's surface severely damaged. If farmers continue to farm with current methods, we only have 60 harvests left before there is no more fertile soil to grow the food in. While the issue of soil depletion causes panic and uncertainty, scientists have also stated that replenishing our soil could be the answer to reversing climate change. Not only does soil erosion impact biodiversity in the food chain, but it also has significant effects on bodies of water. Soil erosion can cause dead zones due to an excess of nutrients in the water, creating an algal bloom where the water becomes hypoxic and depleted of oxygen. This allows no animals to survive or live. Large bodies of water, such as the Gulf of Mexico, are currently experiencing a dead zone. As of 2017, the dead zone stretched 8,776 square miles, equivalent to the same size as New Jersey. Additionally, the agricultural industry uses and contaminates the nation's fresh water supply at an alarming rate, causing it to become a scarce resource. Part of this is because out of the 1.4 billion cubic kilometers of water on Earth, only 9,000 to 14,000 are deemed applicable for human use. In order to produce high yields, farmers use an abundance of water, accounting for 70% of water withdrawals worldwide. According to Danielle Nierenberg, by 2050, half of the world's population will be affected by the water supply. The EPA's National Water Quality Indicator found that agriculture is the leading cause of water pollution in the U.S., but is not regulated in the Clean Water Act, which governs water pollution. Ever since chemical inputs were introduced into the farming industry, they have leached out of the ground and made their way into nearby bodies of water. The increase in chemical inputs have caused many individuals to suffer from severe health complications. From 2005 to 2013, 7 children in Creighton, Nebraska were diagnosed with cancer and eventually died due to chemicals in their drinking water. Another important issue as it relates to the rapid growth of the agricultural industry is climate change and global warming. Many factors feed and worsen climate change, but the agricultural industry is the top contributor. Agriculture and climate change have a symbiotic relationship, meaning climate change also has a significant effect on agriculture. The farming industry is known as the Goldilocks industry because the temperature and precipitation have to be just right to have a successful harvest. Farmers are the leading cause of climate change, however, they could be the source of positive environmental change. They have the opportunity to switch to more environmentally efficient techniques and have the ability to use natural inputs rather than chemicals. The United States government policies play a vital role in funding the obesity epidemic that is crippling Americans today. When farmers receive federal subsidies, they are encouraged to grow commodity crops, which are often used in the production of processed foods. Processed foods are those that are made with cheap ingredients, made to have long shelf lives, and are marketed to attract a wide variety of consumers. The problem is that the crops that are most heavily subsidized are rarely consumed in their natural state. Rather, corn is processed into high fructose corn syrup, soybeans are turned into refined soybean oil, and wheat is broken down into refined carbohydrates, which are said to be worse than table sugar. Obesity in America has become extremely prevalent, as seen in this graph, due to the convenience, low price, and availability of processed foods. In as little as 50 years, Americans' health has significantly plummeted, resulting in 71% of the population, 100 million people, being classified as overweight or obese. Also, all 50 states have reached an obesity rate of at least 20%, while a multitude exceed 40%. Not only have obesity rates in America increased, but so have the chronic illnesses that arise from unhealthy eating patterns. As of 2015, 25.8 million Americans suffered from type 2 diabetes, while 16 million were affected by heart disease. Obesity is also responsible for claiming over 300,000 lives per year. The issue lies in the fact that in almost every processed food item, there's an abundance of added sugars. Added sugars are those that are added to food anytime before its consumption and can now be found in 74% of packaged food items. A study completed by the CDC found that only 12.2% of Americans meet the daily recommended fruit intake and only 9.3% meet the daily recommended vegetable intake. Moreover, when Americans do consume fruits and vegetables, it's usually in forms such as French fries, pizza, and pasta sauce. The food industry in America heavily markets and advertises unhealthy processed food to consumers for profit. Marketers have mastered the practice of misleading consumers to believe that many foods are healthier than they truly are, a phenomenon known as a health halo. This is demonstrated by Yoplait yogurt, which is marketed to seem extremely healthy, when in reality it contains 26 grams of sugar, equivalent to 6 teaspoons. Many times, manufacturers obfuscate nutritional information in order to confuse consumers, targeting young people and minorities in particular. In 2011, General Mills suffered a lawsuit for its product, Fruit Roll-Ups, because they stated it was made with real fruit, when in reality, 3 out of the 5 ingredients were added sugars. Additionally, many food companies only state the total sugar on their nutrition facts label, rather than stating how much sugar was added in the processing of that product. The food industry spends billions of dollars encouraging individuals to consume sugary beverages and foods every year. According to the marketing industry, the 10 major food and beverage companies also rank among the top 100 companies in the U.S. spending advertising dollars. The food industry places a large emphasis on children due to their vulnerability and lack of nutritional knowledge. Harvard School of Public Health found that the food industry spends nearly $10 billion per year marketing beverages and foods to children. Low-income and minority groups are also vulnerable to big food because they oftentimes lack the financial resources to buy healthy food items. Many of these low-income areas are classified as food deserts, which means they have limited access to full-service grocery stores. The American Journal of Medicine found that people who live in a food desert end up facing 7 times the risk of early life stroke and double the risk of heart attack and diabetes. The SNAP program, which intends to help low-income Americans afford nutritious foods, is part of the reason obesity is so prevalent today. The SNAP program provides 42 million low-income families with a stipend to purchase for specific foods. A study completed by Oxford University found that 50% of all children will have grown up in a household that receives food stamps. However, 75% of food purchased with SNAP benefits is oftentimes junk food. Big food has begun to dominate the food industry and control what Americans eat by aggressively advertising food products that benefit large corporations. Executives of large corporations have learned to combat accusations made against their companies by funding scientists to conduct research that discounts scientific evidence. The FDA is simply not placing consumers before industry interests. Instead, they're acting with corporations to approve foods that are packed with toxic chemicals. This issue has only worsened with lobbyists. Lobbying consists of any legal attempt by individuals or groups to influence government policy or action. Lobbyists work closely with corporations to make certain the government approves health guidelines that align with the company's interests. Sustainable agriculture is the key to eradicating hunger while ensuring the planet remains healthy for future generations by changing how individuals farm and what resources are used. The word sustainability in this thesis refers to a futuristic outlook that focuses on how present actions affect the future of economics, the environment, and society. The issue of feeding the world continues to become more pressing each year due to the rapidly increasing population. Projections have shown that by 2050, the world population is expected to rise over 9 billion people. This proves that it is apparent the world is in need of another agricultural revolution, one that puts the health of the planet and humankind first. In order to transition to a more sustainable farming practices, updated agricultural methods and techniques are vital. One emerging method of farming that has proven to be extremely successful and dependable is precision agriculture. Precision agriculture heavily relies on the use of smart technology such as remote sensing, GPS, and geographical information systems to run the farm. Not only does this simplify tasks for the farm owner, but it also minimizes the overspraying of chemicals. Another farming method of sustainable agriculture is using crop rotation to combat pests. By periodically relocating the crops, this causes pests to lose their host and eventually die off. Crop rotation alleviates the needs for pesticides and insecticides. Integrated pest management is another natural method to control undesirable species by using biological agents to combat the infestation. But one of the most important sustainable agricultural methods is using no-till agriculture rather than plowing fields. No-till farming incorporates the use of cover crops to protect the soil during non-growing seasons. The federal government has a duty to implement and support policies that promote a healthy planet and population. SNAP is one of many federal programs that must undergo significant reform in order to provide low-income Americans with proper nutrition. If the SNAP program would shift its focus from quantity to quality, Americans' health would significantly increase. One suggestion includes limiting and regulating the types of food that can be bought with SNAP benefits. Also, more frequent benefits rather than the current monthly schedule. If recipients received their benefits weekly, they would be less hesitant to buy fresh produce. Lastly, incentivizing healthier alternatives. Michigan recently introduced an incentive program called Double Up Food Bucks, where for every $10 in food stamps spent on locally grown produce, SNAP recipients receive a $10 coupon they can use to buy more. The U.S. dietary guidelines are another important influential federal program that can be used to advocate for a healthier future. To achieve a more trustworthy and reliable DG, the lobbying system must become more transparent so that consumers can trust that nutritious foods are truly healthy, not just marketed as such. Taxing junk food is an important solution to decrease America's consumption of processed foods and combat the obesity epidemic. Using sin taxes is effective because they create a financial barrier to consume certain goods while also generating revenue that can be used in beneficial ways. In order to foster more trust in the food system, the government should restrict misleading health claims on packaging labels. Food labels should be required to state how much information or how much sugar has been added to the product during manufacturing in the food products label. Additionally, sodas and sweet teas and energy drinks should be mandatory for them to have a warning label on their beverage so consumers can know how much sugar is truly in their product. Lastly, implementing a stoplight system on food packaging. If a label has a green logo, that means the food is good for you. If it's yellow, it means it's essentially neutral. However, if the food packaging label is red, that means you should put down the item and do not purchase. It's equivalent to a large stop sign. To create a healthier, more sustainable future, consumer education must be a top priority. Improving access to nutritional information would allow the average consumer to make more informed and healthy decisions. Additionally, another step towards creating a healthy future is to inform consumers about where their food is coming from and encouraging individuals to shop at their local farmers market rather than supermarkets. America has the resources and technology to create a healthier, more sustainable future farming. However, it's up to the government and its constituents to bring about change. It is absolutely imperative that individuals consider farming as a vital component in the world's fight for a better tomorrow. Our bodies and our planet depend on it. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit more about, you spent some time on SNAP. Is this like nefarious, intentional, or is this just the policies laid out and it was not laid out well? Or is there a darker side to this where certain people are pushing the buttons as to what people can buy and not buy?
Well, there's definitely a much darker side than up here. It's definitely one of those programs that is aimed at helping people, but there's underlying motives that are really causing people to suffer health complications because SNAP has partnered with grocery stores, and grocery stores are very methodical in what foods they place out on the end of aisles. Whenever SNAP benefits are given out that specific week of the month, they know to put those specific processed food items on the shelves to where it'd be easiest for the recipients to go pick out the unhealthy food. So it's not aimed at helping Americans, and that's because a large amount of our government and its people are not affected by SNAP, so they don't really care if it's a beneficial program.
On your interviews, and I'm so glad you were able to conduct some interviews with experts in the field, any missed opportunities, or if you had the opportunity to do further interviews, who would you go after as far as trying to get more data?
I reached out to Mark Hyman. I knew that was a stretch in the beginning of my thesis because I knew he has significant amount of knowledge on this topic, but he never got back to me. And then there was a few other authors that never reached back out to me. But my interview with Professor Jeff Edwards at the U of A was extremely helpful in my environmental section. If I could go back and redo it, I definitely would incorporate more interviews. I think I kind of just got on a roll of researching and writing and didn't really conduct as many as I could have.
Yeah, some of the local farmers are into
Yeah, I
the
didn't.
Delta. Would have been kind of interesting to see. Great job.
Thank you.
Fantastic job.
Thank you.
I mean, like that was apes in a nutshell. That was fantastic. I'm so proud of you. I guess my question kind of piggybacks on that. Did you come across in your research at all the connection between the obesity crisis and the unhealthy food related to the rising healthcare costs? And have you seen or read any solution that our government has on those?
Well, like you said, it's definitely a for-profit, industry, and that's what everything is becoming in America nowadays. I know after watching Allison's thesis, she focused on the healthcare system is a for-profit system, and so America's just trying to make money any way they can, and it's never about the individual's health. And so my research didn't really take me in that direction, but that's definitely an interesting way to look at that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I wrote several things down, but one thing I kept going to is policies. Farm bill, talking about Clean Water Act. Do you think that there's any real push to make true change in these policies in government, within government, from what you researched early on to what you researched later? Do you see that there's really any push to make good changes? And then I have a second question.
I think most change that's being pushed right now is from grassroots organizations. I don't think the U.S. government is necessarily, they're putting out what they want to do, but they're not being real strong in their push towards it. So I think a lot of the change is going to come from individuals themselves and small family farms, and we're just going to have to try to shift our focus more to the local farm rather than large corporate farms.
And my other thing, the sugarcoating science. And something that you brought up today that I liked, that we talked about when you were writing your paper, food deserts. And the more, after you left that day and we talked about it, I started really thinking about it, and it really struck a chord with me in rural Arkansas and how many food deserts we really have right here in our state. Were you able to do any more research on that? And I wonder too, it just makes me think what one thing leads to the next that leads to the next. The farms are getting smaller, or we're losing farmers because of the big companies taking over, and then that trickles down, and then the grocery stores are gone in these areas, and a lot of the schools are having to consolidate. The communities are becoming more low social economic status. It just seems like there's a huge trickle down effect from that, and I'm wondering if you got to see kind of any of that.
I kind of focused on the broad idea of food deserts for my policy rec section, but yes, that is very true. There are a significant amount of food deserts in our state, and that leads to, worse healthcare, and then they don't have access to healthcare. And so it kind of creates like a closed loop system. They're just in a spiral. They can't get out of it. And so making sure that we have full service grocery stores everywhere is definitely a fight against corporate agriculture.
Well, I think you should take this to college and continue on. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Lauren, I've just been so impressed with your organization and your diligence and just your commitment to this project from day one. You've been so organized, and I know that when you started making your slideshow, you had a lot of information that you had to cut. Was there anything that you had to cut that you'd like to talk about?
That's hard because there was a lot, but I feel like a lot of my environmental section had to be cut down. I kind of gave y'all broad topics of how farming is impacting our environment, but I feel like in my paper I got to dig a lot deeper, and I also feel like that happened with my nutrition section. I had to cut out lots of problems with our food packaging labels. That was a significant part of my paper that I had to cut out, was just how crazy the government can, switch stuff around, and you'll never know what ingredient truly was in there, because there's a piece of information I came about that said if a company doesn't want to state that a specific ingredient was in a food label, they'll just name it as a number because you don't know what that number is. And so, and most of the time people don't look at a nutrition label going, oh, that's so-and-so, I'm going to put this back down. So they can really, ease their way around this and convince consumers to buy unhealthy foods. And so I thought that was really scary. And just, I guess the government's control over what we eat is a lot bigger than I ever thought it was. And this topic honestly was never on my radar before I took this class, and now I have so much, I want to go do something about it because it's scary when you learn about it. You're like, oh my gosh, that's actually what I'm eating, and then you don't want to eat processed foods anymore. So
That's actually my second question is how have your eating or purchasing habits changed since you've been doing this research project?
well, I wish I could say. I kept telling my mom, I'm going to be a vegan by the time this is over, and I'm not vegan, but I think I'm more conscious of shopping at a supermarket for my fruits and vegetables, or, if I can, I want to go to a local farmer's market and support the farmers that are trying to make a living out, of this industry. And I think that was another thing, going back to your last question. It was really shocking hearing the stories of people who own small family farms and just their despair, and they don't see a way to come back because now these companies, even if you don't buy your crop, or even if you don't buy like products from them, your seeds are still coming from them because they're now, they make seeds, they make fertilizers, they make pesticides that resist their own, they've just created this whole system to where you can't escape it. And so that was another part of my thesis that I thought was really sad, was just these small family farms don't have a living anymore.
I think I have one more question. There's a connection between, the poor purchasing habits with SNAP and, of course, the food deserts that has already been brought up. In your research for solutions, did you come across the advantages of community gardens and, community members coming together to kind of bring fresh produce into their own neighborhoods?
I didn't really find anything about community gardens, but there was a program, and I can't specifically say what it was called, but it talked about these. It was kind of like a local farmers market, but there was incentives for buying these local farmers produce, kind of like the double up food bucks in Michigan, except that was not just for SNAP recipients. This program, if you bought so much from this farmer, you get a coupon for this much more. And I think really adding those incentives in our food program would help people buy more from local farms instead of just going to a regular supermarket. But I think right now there's not enough incentives to shop at a local farmers market unless you're knowledgeable about the benefits of it.
I think I have one more question, if that's okay. So I always like to try to think of solutions to concerns or issues that we face. And so I would ask you, what is it we could do here in our Little Rock bubble? This is big. This is bigger than just us. What can we do to be part of the solution to make things better?
Like I said, I think shopping at local farmers markets is truly what we need to shift our focus towards. But also, our community could set up our own farmers market to where people, low-income people, and minority groups who really don't have the benefits or the means to shop at those local farmers market, we could create a community-based program that helps them receive fresh produce and fresh vegetables rather than them having to survive off a bag of chips for a week. I think there's just not enough. I don't think people know enough about the SNAP program and its dark side. And I think really consumer education is a big fight against this. I personally did not know about all this stuff before I started researching. And so I think, like making people educated about what they're eating and just making programs that can allow the average person to shop would be extremely helpful.
Time for some audience questions.
John.
So I had a question about the stoplight systems that you mentioned towards the end, and I like the idea, and it sounds good, and it's like, if implemented, it's like in your face, it grabs the attention of the customer, and they see the effects pretty blatantly. So, but because of its nature, and that this incentivizes the customer to buy some of their products, it doesn't seem like the companies themselves are the ones that would put these into place. So who's going to be the motivator for companies to have the stoplight system on their products?
federal government really has a duty to implement that. But like I said, with the use of lobbyists and then working closely with large corporations, it really is hard to get any significant amount of positive change flowing in the food system because the federal government is moved by money. And so if they're receiving money from these corporate companies, it's extremely hard to try to do the right thing. And so, yes, like you said, it is a great idea. It's just whether the federal government is going to buy into it. And so I don't really have an answer for that, but if the federal government would do its job correctly, we would have a much better food system. Yeah.
So you talked about the importance of sustainable agriculture briefly. I know a lot of that comes with, we have these developments in technology and like precision agriculture, but oftentimes that's so much more expensive for farmers. So how do we like incentivize farmers to make that change?
I came across lots of programs that are helping farmers afford these new technologies, and that is going to be one of the major fights for a more sustainable future. And if we would subsidize these new technologies rather than processed foods, we could shift our focus from something negative and turn it towards something positive that would greatly impact our whole country. Yes.
One of the things that's clear is that lobbyists hold the key to a lot of this stuff. And it's also clear that the commodity groups have better lobbyists than like the fruits and vegetable.
Right.
But what do you think is the one, if the government would make one change that could help the issues laid out in your thesis, what would that one thing that you think would have the most impactful change, what would that be?
Shifting our subsidies towards more fruits and vegetables and positive foods for us, because right now it all goes down to what the Farm Bill subsidizes. And because the Farm Bill subsidizes commodity crops, those are used in the production of processed foods, and the processed foods are marketed to low income groups. And then it's this whole system. So if you get back to the root of the issue, it's that commodity crops are being subsidized heavily. And so any farmer nowadays, you're dumb to not buy into commodity farming because that's how you make a living. You can't make a living off fruits and vegetables. But that's the problem. Like I said, everyone's just trying to capitalize on everything they can. And so if you can make the most money making commodity crops, that's what you're going to do. But then it creates, like I said, this closed loop system that we can't get out of. Yeah, sure.
You talked a lot about the effects of market consolidation on the agricultural economy. I was wondering if you saw a hopeful future for deconsolidation, or is there nothing we can do at this point?
Honestly, a lot of my research was negative, but when I was in my policy rec section, it made me feel more hopeful for the future, because I felt like writing this, I was so sad by everything. Nothing seemed positive, but all these new grassroots organizations that are arising and are really they're really gaining popularity and lots of followers. I feel like that is really hopeful. And I think like I said, if people are knowledgeable about the issues that's going to have on our economy, our environment, and our health, I think people are going to be inspired to want to make a change. So I think it just goes down to people need to know what the issue is. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, you're doing an awesome job.
Thank you.
Okay, did you run into anything about how much property that Bill Gates has bought up and what his plan is there, and how that could be possibly a positive or a negative impact? What this one man, his plan is for the entire country?
Yes, ma'am. Multiple people have asked me that, and sadly my research did not take me in that way, but that is a very important topic that needs to be addressed, because I don't think a lot of people know what his incentive is on that, owning all that land.
Yeah, like for Arkansas, how much does he have now? Is it true that he has about 30%?
I'm sure. I didn't get to research that, but I'm sure that's probably about right. Yeah, he's in it for the money. So.
And why is that so surprising across the room? Like, why are we so unaware of that?
Because yes, it is. And I feel like this whole industry is a lot like that. I think a lot of people don't understand what truly goes on in the food industry. I think like I said, we're misled to believe food labels are true. Well, I think we're misled to believe that the food system is truly good for us. We don't know all the ins and outs of it. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And so that is what's truly scary to me, is unless you spend time researching and understanding, oh, this food is marketed to be healthy for me, but it's really horrible for me. A lot of people don't know that. And so that's what's truly scary about this topic is that it does have such a significant impact on us. We just don't know about it.
Yeah, one more feedback on that. So my understanding is they're trying to grow food, grow protein in labs. I mean, they've been doing that, I guess, we've all heard of, but is that part of this whole plan? I guess that would be a whole nother thesis topic. I'm
Right.
sure that-
That's kind of, I guess, more GMOs based, but that's more like Charlotte's. No, that's more Charlotte's topic. So I don't know a ton about that, but I think that is occurring more rapidly just because our population is increasing so fast. And like I said, our soils are being depleted at such a fast rate that we only have 60 harvests left before there's no fertile soil to grow food in. And that's if we continue to farm with current methods. And so, I mean, growing foods in labs is the new thing to do because we're trying to preserve what we have. And I mean, unless we find more updated ways to farm, we are kind of in a bad situation. And so that's going to be the new method of farming. So, yes, ma'am.
Okay, there's no more, I'll wait one more thing. So Hippocrates, as a pharmacist, I'll tell you, Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. 400 years before Christ.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely turned into.
That's it, that's all I gotta say. Sounds like it's right.
Negative, yes. Yes, sir.
I'll ask one last question, maybe multiple questions here. In terms of fresh produce or non-preservative food, a couple of things. Do you read anything about how much of that is wasted? Is that a deterrent for people to go buy food that's going to have a short shelf life? And then I guess the second half of that is, did you come across anything that would maybe for people to be educated on how they could prolong that? And what's going to my mind, there was this Shark Tank thing where someone, you can prolong the life of bananas. There's some little cover you put on the stems. Anybody else see that? Someone's nodding. It's like it went from going bad in a few days to like a few weeks. So
Right.
I'm just kind of going rambling here to say, how much food is wasted that's fresh, and how can we maybe improve that by extending the life of fresh produce?
Well, we actually covered that in my human geography class and in my environmental science class. It's called the ugly food movement. And a lot of foods at supermarkets don't get bought due to the way they look. And that's because a lot of these farmers are trying to combat the corporate farms by not making a perfect tomato or a perfect apple. And so these foods appear uglier because not as many chemicals or additives were used in making it look pretty. And so that is there's the ugly food movement. But yes, a lot of food gets wasted and a lot of produce gets wasted. I know I'm not very conscious about, we buy bananas and in 2 days I'm like, where'd they go? My mom's like, oh, they already went bad. And, it's just, America wastes a ton of food. We talked about a lot about this in our classes this year. And I don't know of a specific program, but I do know that a lot of reason these SNAP beneficiaries don't buy produce is because if they're only receiving their benefits once a month, they're not going to they're not going to spend their money on produce because they know, oh, well, if I only have a month to eat this food, then I'm going to buy chips. I'm going to buy, canned meats. I'm going to buy anything that can last them a month. If produce only lasts 2 days, that's not the biggest buck for them. They can't buy as much. And so that is a serious issue in today's society.
So Lauren, they can only buy those like at the beginning of the month, and they last them a month. They can't
They only receive benefits once a month.
But they can't use that over the month. They have to spend it at the beginning of the month?
Yeah, I think it's once a week, yes, ma'am. Or just that week. And like I said, the grocery stores are very, they're very good at putting out the foods exactly when they know when the SNAP benefits are going out that week. And so they make it difficult to not buy those food items. It's really honestly pretty sad.
Great job.
Oh, let's get with
Yeah.